Just say yes.
I don't have sense enough to be
He wouldn't admit it if he
Everywhere I
was.
leave my head is my home, so I have the ball.
I saw you at the game the other night, just parading around. I said, well, I just don't understand.
Ms. Giamatti, are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
To speak?
Get a motion that the closed meeting is closed and the board certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting to which this certification applies. And two, only such business matters as were identified in the motion concerning the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Honeycutt, second for Mr. Campbell. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes, Mr. Nichol, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Item A on our board is after last night's meeting of the Board of Supervisors. We're very appreciative and grateful that the Board of Supervisors did approve our request for the additional $35 million necessary to complete the construction project and complete the whole budget that we need for the completed program. And tonight, I would like to have this board accept the money from the board as a bond that will be coming to us in the spring.
Okay.
Item B is we will then need to turn around and have you approve so that we can get in touch with the low bidder, which is Cleveland Construction. They will be joining us at the meeting where we will be having the groundbreaking on December the 20th, and we'll have all the paperwork signed, but I need you to vote to accept the low bid tonight in an action item. And number 3, last night, because of the issue of the additional monies and revenue, need for revenue, the Board of Supervisors passed a resolution requesting of Senator Ruff and Delegate Tommy Wright that they put Mecklenburg County on the list of counties that would be in a position to take the 1 cent sales tax for school construction only. And we have talked, both I and Wayne Carter have talked with our delegates. They are understanding and they are willing to do that on our behalf.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it's going to pass the legislature, but it means that they would be willing to take it on our behalf. But they do need a resolution from both the school board and the Board of Supervisors.
We need to support the resolution. Okay, Mr. Edwards.
I have a question on item B. When will the contract be written and sent to the attorney and then sent back to the school board to be read?
The contract is in the attorney's hands and they're going over it now.
Okay. So this vote that we're taking tonight does not
It doesn't bind us to the
lock
contract.
us to the contract.
No,
It just
not until we signed it at the point of that meeting. This is simply stating that this board has the funding and will contract with the lowest bidder. We can still modify the contract as we need to, but it's moving at the next step.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't want to get in a box.
Right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Chairman. At what time is the groundbreaking slated for the 20th?
2 o'clock.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, we're going to continue on to action. Get a motion that the school board approves the personnel recommendations.
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Garner, second from
Second.
Mr. Edwards. Roll call. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Abstain. Item B, that the school board approves the bond for additional appropriated funds for construction.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, second from Ms. Bailey. Any discussion? None. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Get a motion that the school board accepts the low bid from Cleveland Construction for the new middle school, high school complex. We have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Edwards. We have a second from Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? None. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Garner.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Edwards.
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant.
Yes. Get a motion that the school board approves a resolution to support a 1-cent sales tax for the school facility construction.
So moved.
We have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt and a second from Ms. Garner. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Garner.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Edwards.
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant.
Yes. Get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Very good.
That is the shortest and most expensive.
Mail the money.
We spent $150 million in 15 minutes. So that's why.
No, it's gonna take two more years. Maybe,
that's what,
maybe
10
2 or 3
million
more
per
years, we don't know.
Ms. Garner, did you get my text today?
$10 million in
Good.
How's that feel?
We'll see what that number is in 2 years.
We'll leave at 11 o'clock.
I guarantee we'll be back
I
asking.
really want to
that
keep one under an hour.
One for each one of them.
That's sitting on that 100 million. They chose the site.
This is it, right? 2 million, that's it, right? I said, well, I want to know something. I said, 2 years, 20 million for finishing. I said, we ought to do that.
Enjoy it. Hope you're all happy.
It's just, I did. I said, well, you need to quit.
Because look, they're gonna get what, 5 million a year.
I had a very enjoyable life.
Yeah, I was like, plus reassessment, and then that, that picked up a penny.
And it keeps on coming in.
That's amazing.
Nicholas got 1180 on his PSAT.
I want to make sense.
2 of them, which one?
The one over there by the train museum.
Yeah.
You know pretty good?
You need more vitamin D.
He's a good guy.
Somebody's getting a loan of $60,000, so they got to go that way.
Well, at least you'll be flushed out so you can eat lots.
They gave me a price one. I'm like, that's for
Tell him you know me, man.
It's vitamin D. Vitamin D. Magnesium and vitamin D.
I'm good.
What are you doing, boy? You just stopped by just to visit?
No, he wanted to find out who his new boss was going to be.
Yes. Do they, is it public now? Just once we vote on it.
Yeah, it's probably.
Can I infer that since there was an extension that maybe?
You're,
Can I
Hey,
infer
George,
that
you're
since
smarter
there
than
was
you
an
look.
Extension that I know? Yeah.
you're smarter than you look.
I'm definitely not